Right. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this webinar session. So today we have the webinar on the topic of new trends in digital marketing. And so I'm glad that our Goodman group at Goodman School of Business hosts this session. And this is part of our micro-credential course, digital marketing certification course, run by Goodman Group and the Professional Continuing Studies at Brock University. To start today's webinar, I'm going to start with the land acknowledgement. We begin this gathering by acknowledging the land on which we gather is the traditional territory of Haudenosaunee and the Anishinaabe peoples, many of whom continue to live and work here today. This territory is covered by the Upper Canada Treaties and is within the land protected by the Dish with One Spoon, One Pan agreement. Today, this gathering place is home to many First Nations, Métis, and Innu peoples. And acknowledging reminds us that our great standard of living is directly related to the resources and friendship of Indigenous people. So today we have 4 speakers, and on my left, we have Dr. Abdul Ashraf, Associate Professor of Marketing at Goodman School of Business, Dr. Waqar Nadeem, Associate Professor of Marketing at Goodman School of Business, and also Dr. Michelle Chen. She's Assistant Professor of Business Communication, and we also have Byron Russell. He's the Vice President in Digital Marketing at Geotech. And so to start our today's webinar, I'm going to give the time to Dr. Abdul Ashraf. So Dr. Abdul Ashraf, before joining Brock, he worked as an assistant professor at Neoma Business School at France, and his primary research and teaching interests include innovation and technology management, e-commerce, mobile commerce, consumer decision-making, and international marketing. His research on consumer decision-making focuses on various aspects of retailing and technology adoption in various settings, ranging from customers in Australia to rural customers in Bangladesh and Pakistan. So today he's going to introduce how the way in which AR, VR will change how we create and experience content in tourism, social network, and education. I'm going to give the time to Dr. Ashraf.
Thank you so much, Caillou, for the introduction and having me in this webinar. Today I'll just talk about the influence of AR and VR on consumer experiences in general. Of course, this is a huge topic, but the scope would be how AR and VR is being utilized in sort of from a marketing perspective when it comes to consumer decision making. Right? So I know many of us have heard about AR and VR, and for the past year and a half or so, we have been conducting studies, interviews, and surveys. And one of the questions that usually pops up is, oh yeah, I've heard about AR and VR, but we do not exactly know what's the difference. Like, what does it mean? What's the differences? What are some of the use cases? So I'll just sort of talk about briefly on that. So when it comes to AR, what it does is we have this physical space, and the digital content that we're looking at through our cell phone or our tablet, that gets projected onto our real environment. So if I'm looking on the left-hand side, the IKEA example, the sofa set, a couch, whatever, that was on my tablet, right? And I can project that onto my real environment. So 75% is real and 25% is the virtual sort of aspect to it, which is getting projected onto the physical space. On the other hand, what happens in the case of virtual reality is we ourselves get teleported, or we get immersed or submerged into a virtual environment. So in case of AR, we are still looking left and right. We know we are wherever we are. It's just that we're projecting some of the content, products, or things onto the real world. We ourselves get into the virtual environment. So that's the main sort of difference. Some of the use cases when it comes to AR, retail that I've already talked about, and in AR has significantly more important when it comes to retail environment. IKEA, Nike, and all those big brands, they have been sort of working on AR specifically. And what happens is that we used to go shopping. For example, if you have to buy a sofa set, it's always confusing. Dimensions, color, how would it look like if I want to place this lamp or a sofa at this particular location, what would happen? If you want to try on a garment, right? Buying online is always difficult because you like the color, you know your size, but how would it look like? So those sort of aspects have been taken care by AR. So retail industries is sort of big on AR at the moment. Training aspect is also important. Is Google has already working on the AR glasses, and an example would be if you have a big machinery and you have 50 buttons and red wires and yellow wires, and what to do with that. So with your AR technology, holding up your cell phone, you can just project and see, and it can tell you, it can map, this button basically is for this purpose. You can also have an avatar that pops up and can guide you through how you should be going about it. Arts and culture, so BBC Civilization, we have also used this research, and I will also talk about some of the research that we have been currently doing. You don't have to travel all the way to Egypt to see those mummies and those artifacts and all that stuff. You can really project right in front of you, and you can interact with that. And you can also, they have those options where you click and it will just explain you all what this mummy year, which era was this mummy from, and all those details. And it's really immersive. If you haven't tried it, we have brought this. This is a VR sort of headsets, but if you haven't tried it, it's difficult to sort of get a sense of what it would look like. Navigation and many car companies, actually, what is happening is NIO is a Chinese company at the moment. What they have done is they have their own NIO AR glasses. So it can also, so whenever we travel, we have this Google Maps. So it gives you an arrow and you're like, there are 50 lanes here. It's always confusing. So this AR will map everything explicitly onto the navigation track, and you will never get sort of wrong. At the same time, the passengers, they can have a cinema screen while somebody is driving, and you can sit in your car and it's like a cinema in front of you because the other passengers, and they can watch movies, attend meetings, and a hologram will pop up. For example, if I'm meeting Caillou, so Caillou's hologram is going to be in front of me, and I'm just chatting as if he's right next to me. And then tourism as well. So there's this many use cases, and there was this hype 2-3 years back. AR is all over the place, but now it's actually sort of being implemented into many sort of industries and sectors. Whereas VR, which is we ourselves get sort of submerged into the virtual or digital environment. A very good example would be a digital twin. I'm not sure anyone has heard about digital twin. Yes, we would have, because we have been working on this project. So this is like amazing sort of a concept. So if you're working in manufacturing, right? How about I want to reduce 10 of my workforce and then see what would be the productivity? Unless until you don't do that, there's no way. I mean, there's some calculations, of course, but literally, if you want to just fire 10 people and see how would that impact my productivity, I cannot. This has to be simulation. So this digital twin concept is that you have your manufacturing, all the processes, all the workflows has been digitally ported into a digital twin. So you have two similar manufacturing plants at the moment. One is a real life, the second one is digital. And all the information has been sort of been feeded into this digital twin. So in this case, what you can do is in this virtual environment, you can have as many simulations as you want. You can reduce labor, you can increase labor, you can remove something, whatever you want. It has the data to sort of predict, and it will run different simulations, and you can tried on many things. Education, learning by doing, learn by doing, right? So 70% of the information is sort of retained when you do things. So I don't know, me being like when I was in my high school, I hated chemistry. So those formulas and those equations and all that stuff. So in this case, H2O, you can actually be in this world and you can actually sort of get the molecules and then combine them in a different structure. So you're actually doing it. So by doing, you learn a lot more. So education has a lot more. Same as, entertainment, tourism, and arts and culture. So David Attenborough, I think we all know who he is. So he collaborated with National History Museum. And this was fascinating. I was looking at it. So he would just be sitting next to you and he'll be talking to you, not like live, but he has recorded his everything in the virtual environment. You can play around with those old fossils of dinosaurs and they will come to life, and then he will be talking to you, explaining you, and you'll be like surrounded by all those. So it's really fascinating technologies that would really make a difference going forward, especially after COVID-19. I think things have sort of picked up from that point onwards. So there was this two sort of scenarios and two AR and VR. This is what the main differences are. Now, from a marketing perspective, how are they being sort of used? Marketing in general, we as consumers, what we do is we have a decision-making process, right? So there has to be a consideration sort of, I need something, there's a consideration stage. Which brand do I go for? But now, here's the thing. If you are loyal to a brand, you probably always will go to that brand. But there are significant other sort of situations where you're not loyal and there's no sort of input to that. You just want to search for different brands. So one way brands are trying to differentiate themselves, especially when there's so much of saturation of whatever product you pick, there are 50 brands selling it now, right? So at the moment, at the consideration stage, what you want is the attraction. Which brand can attract customers? And at this initial stage, companies that have gone for AR and VR is a different experience altogether, right? And I will also talk, it's immersive, it's realistic, it's enjoyable, it's perceived. You have more control now as compared to e-commerce or m-commerce, where you just used to be, okay, here's the color, here's the size, a 360 spin to it, and that's it, right? So there's a lot more control as well. So at the moment, of course, since these technologies are novel, people are considering them as, oh, this is a different experience that this company is offering. So it sort of attracts attention. So once that is done, then it's an evaluation stage. So when you compare an experience through AR or maybe VR, compared to e-commerce or m-commerce, it's a significant reduction of risk. Now you can try, you want to buy a sofa, you can place it, you can paint your wall, whatever color you want, and then you can place the sofa next to it and see how it would look like. So there's no concern in terms of whether it will look nice, it will fit on me properly, how would it look like, and then you can actually explore and interact with the product a lot more, right? And especially research has shown when you are more engaged, you tend to interact more, you tend to spend more time. You will want to know more about it. And that's where the funneling is happening. You're sort of getting those customers funneled in so that you push them towards a purchasing stage. And again, I think because of immersion, realism, and so many factors I've talked about, purchasing stage is actual conversion. So you are engaged, you already are enjoying the experience, you're loving it. The risk factor has been reduced, specifically when you compare it with the online 2D sort of environment. You're more likely sort of get into it. Enjoy and of course, word of mouth, whatever we like, whatever we enjoy, we want to talk about it. And especially at this particular stage, it's so novel. People really sort of, they like it and they want to just, oh, I bought this product and things like that. But the most significant factor is for many companies, it's the return of the product. When you buy online, there's so much of sustainability issues these days. Packaging gets wasted. There's cost for traveling and getting the product delivered to a place, and you have already waited 5 days and it doesn't look good. I want to return it, right? So there's cost, there's sustainability issues, there's environmental issues to it. With these, it's 70% of reduction to their return sort of products now. That's what it's been estimated, right? So because you've already tried it in different ways, you know how it would look like. So there's less possibility of you getting wrong in terms of buying the product. Some of the research projects that I and Professor Wang and Professor Nadeem, we have been working on lately, I would just want to share some of the research projects. So from a tourism context, the interesting fact is that when we are planning a trip, what are we doing? What we are trying to predict, oh, I'll be having fun. It would be pleasurable. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. And I really want to feel it. What we all do is we look for videos. We look for pictures. Oh, this is how it looks like. Oh, this is what probably I can do when I'll be there. With VR, sort of the hotel chains that have sort of all VR experiences being offered, you actually can walk through different places. So so in this particular research, what we did was we were trying to see whether an experience that is offered through VR and an experience that was offered 2D, which is two-dimensional, whatever we usually see in normal days, how would that impact our effective forecasting, which is your hedonic, pleasureful forecasting that you are doing for your future travel, and how would those factors impact your evaluation and then intentions to actually book the flight. Right? So we just found that in the VR context, there was strong impact on, they were high on predictive dominance, which is control, that I have control. The experience gave them the control that, oh, I can do this, I can do that, I can move around freely, look around 360. They feel in control. And whenever you're in control, you're like, oh yeah, I like it. So you enjoy a lot more than pleasure, arousal, a lot more than 2D environment. But the more fascinating thing was the temporal distance. If you think a year from now, like, yeah, should I book it? I mean, let's just wait. Or I don't know. So temporal distance, when it came to VR context, they were so much immersed, didn't matter at all. In the 2D situation, a year from now, the dominance, pleasure, and arousal, they all went down. A year from now, I cannot predict. I don't know how it would look like. So it really sort of, get them hyped in, excited. And of course, we marketers, we try to sell products, and that's what marketers do, right? So another context is social AR that we sort of explored. I think in the interest of time, I'll just try to rush through a few things. But so this Follow Me app, what it does is, if you go that's the app that we use for our context, right? And what our aim was that how can for different apps, max that apps have been able to retain in the 30 days period is 10 to 15%. So 100 people will join in, the retention will be 10 to 15 people in the next 30 days. So retaining is really a problem for many apps. So in case of Follow Me app, they have huge retention. And one of the reasons that we were trying to sort of explore in our research was, how can this social AR aspect can add to customer relationship, so they can socialize more and they would be more willing to use this app in the future going forward. So what we found was that this app is sort of different. The AR aspect of the app is different, is that you can write, you can add sort of content to it, you can leave some messages for your friends, you can tag videos and photos, and you can edit them in whatever ways you want. And then you can share them live with your friends, and they can also visit in the future and go to those places and then sort of get a sense of what message you left for them in that particular place. So it's a lot more engaging, basically. And the best part that we saw was that people who are extrovert, they will always share, they will always talk more. But we also found that people who are introvert to some extent, they were also willing to share. The relationship was significant and positive, even for introverts. So it will also sort of get them going that, I want to share my information and be more in contact with people. And last but not least, the BBC Civilization app, right? So this is how it looks like. So literally, so you are in your room and this vase will come in front of you or whatever you're looking at, and then you can interact with that. So this is in the education sector, and our findings, we did interviews with experts, industry experts, PhDs, marketing scholars. We did a full sort of a thorough review of iOS guidelines, how an AR app should look like. We also look at the literature. Based on that, we sort of came up with certain aspects or dimensions that would constitute an AR usability experience in the education sort of sector. And what we were able to find is that the engagement was 70% more as compared to a 2D sort of environment. Knowledge acquisition was 67% more. So they were able to acquire, and then we asked some questions towards the end. So they were like Likert scales, and then some actual questions that they should have gone through and learned through it. They were 67% more to learn, were more willing to talk about it and use this app in the future. So again, it's more immersive, enjoyable, engaging, realistic, and all those aspects come together, and it makes a lot more sort of, meaningful for the customers and for audience in general. So I'll stop here. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you very much. So, Roseanne, Megan, do you have any quick question you want to ask?
Nothing right off the hop. I've noticed a lot of different websites are using AR. If you want to try on glasses, you can do things like that, or try different things on, or hair color even. I mean, there are different ways that I'm seeing it from a consumer side of things, but I didn't realize the other ways that it could be beneficial.
Yeah, I mean, it has taken off now, and probably going forward, it's just going to grow more. That is for sure. Yeah.
So Abdul, I have a question for AR, VR, that if for marketers or for companies that who might be interested applying those technology in their marketing activities, then would you recommend they go for AR or go for VR, or it depends on the industry?
It depends on the industry. As I said, AR is a lot more focused on the retail industry at the moment. It's just because of the technology itself. And VR is a lot more educational and manufacturing, and then and so it's a training and all those aspects. So at the moment, I think there's some aspects, some technological hindrances at the moment. And I think since Apple is working towards it, and big companies have started to come up with their own sort of versions of AR goggles and then VR headsets and stuff, I think it's industry specific. Okay. But yeah, there's this back and forth, but mostly at the moment it's industry focused.
A follow-up question regarding the usability that you mentioned. So among the usability dimension that from your study, what would be the dimension you find probably more important to users?
That's a very good question. And basically, now I'm getting into the research aspect. So these dimensions that we looked at, we sort of formulated a formative second order construct, which is AR usability experience, which means that AR usability experience is a combination of all these. So we didn't test like individual, we probably would have, but I don't have top of mind, but I think our focus here was to test the overall usability, which is a formation or a second order formative construct. Each and every dimension standalone will contribute towards the usability experience. And I think based on the research that we did, it was massive. Based on interviews, industry experts, we also looked at iOS guidelines. There's huge guidelines that they have given, like what a usability experience should look like when a developer is developing an app. So we took information from there, we took information from the literature review, and we also did interviews. Based on that, these dimensions were the ones that sort of were finalized, and we have scales to measure them. If somebody wants to use that, we can always share the scales to sort of measure.
Great, thank you very much. And so Megan and Roseanne, just want to share a little bit information about this project, because we want to study and come up with a measurement and to see whether the AR app, how friendly or how easy for users to use the AR app. And so we are looking at what are the dimensions that users really care about.
So basically it's because they went, so we used two different websites. One was Google's Art and Culture, and then BBC Civilization, and then this was more than 1,000 participants actually. So this is massive. And one participant, sometimes it costs us $10 to $15. So we cannot have 50,000 participants. So even we have more than 1,000 participants, went through different stages, and we have across sort of different populations. So we tested the measurements and see how would they feel like. And So based on that, we have the results. Yeah.
So are they able to access
Yes.
this like through their device,
Yes.
like whether that's
Yes.
desktop or
Yes,
mobile?
yes. And then we also provide them some guidelines so that they cannot just go wherever they want to go, some guidelines. And so, yeah, they were to spend 20, 25 minutes exploring. Sometimes they spend more, it's up to them. But that is what we were expecting.
Okay. So from a marketing side, how would a company be able to use this? Like I don't know anything about AR.
Yeah.
Would I hire, like research and hire a company, or like how would I go about that? To bring that into my business.
I think that's a technical question. Yeah, I mean, yes.
Or should I wait?
No. That's a very, yeah.
I think with the improvement in technology,
Yes.
technological sophistication, making an AR app is very easy these days.
Okay.
Why I'm saying so, because we have one project again together, we're working on it,
Okay.
and we asked one of our research assistants to create an AR app for us,
Mhm.
because we weren't able to find an app that was readily available in the domain of sustainability.
Mhm.
So we asked our research assistant to develop an AR app for us with certain requirements, of course, for the research purposes. But if you have to incorporate an AR app into your business now, I think it does not require extensive knowledge or domain-specific knowledge if you are really willing, and if it coincides with your overall business idea. Then the technology is there where you can incorporate such tools to just give enriched experience to the users and consumers.
We received a comment on the webinar, the live. I believe AR, VR will greatly reduce cognitive dissonance and the rate of returns in the e-commerce industry.
Yes, exactly. So the risk factor is reduced. If you can try on, you can explore it a lot more, and that's where the 70% of returns have dropped. Why? Because now you know what you're getting into, how would it look like, and things along those lines. Yes.
And so for those who are watching the webinar right now, you feel free to leave your questions in the chat so that Janice will coordinate the question, and after each of the presentation, we will allow 1 or 2 questions, and then if you have more questions, we can leave at the end. Okay.
Can I add one
Sure.
more thing? So this cognitive dissonance, there's another problem, because you looked at it, because this research that just recently came out, because customers really know what they're going to get, and once they get it and they feel slightly up and down, they're like, oh no, this is not what I was expecting. So there's another like a problem to it as well. So because now you have exact expectations of how it's going to look like, but once, because the technology has it's progressing, it may still have some flaws at the moment. So it is realistic, but not as realistic as when it comes actually and it's right up there. So there's research that you also have to be careful that there's the other side to it as well.
Because consumer might raise their expectations.
Exactly,
right?
exactly.
All right. Thank you very much, Abdul. So next, Dr. Waqar Nadeem is the Associate Professor of Marketing at Goodman School of Business. He received a short research grant on the topic of the Metaverse, understanding ethical risk and opportunities for business and consumers. Dr. Nadeem's research has published in reputable journals such as Industrial Marketing Management, Journal of Business Ethics, Technological Forecasting and Social Change, International Journal of Information Management, and among others. And so today his topic is on the metaverse, dead or alive.
Okay, so thank you so much, Kayu, for the introduction. I will be focusing on the topic of metaverse. Specifically, the topic is the metaverse dead or alive, the future of marketing with metaverse. So in particular, I will be focusing on 3 main and important questions related to metaverse. The first one is, what is the metaverse? The second question that I will be focusing on is how metaverse is being utilized by different businesses, or what are some of the use cases of the metaverse. And thirdly, I will be reflecting on, is metaverse dead or alive? Right? And how does the future look like in the era of metaverse? So to start with, the first question, what is the metaverse? So metaverse became quite a buzzword in the past year, which was year 2022, or in late year 2021. So the term metaverse itself is not new. The metaverse term was coined in the year 1992 by Neil Stephenson. He wrote one novel called Snow Crash, and he was the first one to use the terms metaverse, or to use or introduce the terms metaverse or avatars. But why is it so that the metaverse term became a buzzword, or a term that has been searched, or that has become the most searched terms in the year 2022? It was mainly because of the company Meta, formerly Facebook. So all of a sudden, when Facebook changed its name to Meta, it started creating a buzz in the industry and among academics that why they have changed their name. Facebook might have their own reasons. They had been under the limelight due to data breaches, privacy and security issues. And at the forefront of those privacy and security issues was Cambridge Analytica scandal. So I wouldn't go into the details, but almost data of 87 million users was compromised at Facebook. So Meta wanted to have a reinvented image or reinvented reputation in the market. So that's the backstory of Meta. But before I expand more onto the topic of metaverse, I would like to ask a question from the audience if you would participate. What is the most important thing for humans today, except for air, water, and chocolates, of course? So what is it that humans cannot basically live without? Social media. Social media, interaction, and
I would say, yeah, social interaction.
Social interaction, right? And if we strictly talk about things, it might be your handheld device or the laptop. Specifically, if we ask the younger generation, Generation Z in particular, Generation Y, these are the people who spend around 5 hours on average during a day on these handheld devices. But phones or computers are worth nothing if they are not connected to the internet, right? So if they are not connected to the internet, they do not mean anything, no matter how superior features it possesses. So it has to be connected to the internet for the world. But then the question is, what do we actually do on the internet? You know, broadly, there is plethora of apps that humans or users use for different reasons. But broadly, if we have to categorize them, then we use the internet for, number one, like you mentioned, socialization, connection. Number two, work. So work is the most important, or one of the most important aspects that we do on the internet. Number three is entertainment and fun. We use the internet for shopping, entertainment, and fun. Right. So then what is metaverse and what it has to do with the internet? Metaverse is the vision of the new internet. Right. So metaverse is the vision of the new internet, which means metaverse combines, converges, unifies, harmonizes different cutting-edge technologies that we have now, including artificial intelligence, including augmented reality, including virtual reality, including blockchain technology. So metaverse combines, unifies, harmonizes them to create a shared virtual space. So that is metaverse. Just to give you a context, we have seen the advent of Web 1.0, where we had static websites. So when the internet came into being, we had websites. Those were just static. Whatever website provider or the seller was telling us, we had to just look at it and agree or disagree with it. Right? So those were static websites. Then we saw the advent of Web 2.0, which was more interactive. We saw the rise of social networking sites, right? So now the websites became more interactive. People could post their comments, good or bad. It is still contested whether these comments were authentic, credible, or no. That's a different debate altogether. But the ethos of Web 2.0 was interactivity, interactive websites, social networking sites. Now we are living in the era of Web 3.0, where the internet will be more immersive. So more immersion would be there. And I would expand more about it in the later half of my talk. But immersiveness is the key to Web 3.0 because people want to have enriched experiences, seamless experience. So that is the ethos of Web 3.0 or Metaverse. So just to give you a further context of what Metaverse is, so during COVID, businesses were forced in a way to transition towards online means. Even if someone was willing to have an online presence or not, that was secondary. They were forced to have an online presence. And then also, who would have thought that we will be celebrating the birthday parties on MS Teams? You know, this had happened. In the education sector, even lecturers or professors who like to lecture in person, interact with the audience, they were also forced to teach online somehow. They had professors didn't have any other choice. So in terms of MS Teams, like let's just say I was teaching a class of 45 students, and in the very beginning, if I have announced for the students, okay, you can turn on your cameras, so that I know who is paying attention, who is not paying attention, are they engaged, are they engaged or not. But after a while, only let's just say out of the class of 45, maybe 6 to 7 students would turn on their cams, and when they see that most of the students do not have their cams on, they would turn off their cams. So I don't know whether they are listening, whether they're not listening, whether they are engaged or not. There is no criteria through which I can gauge their participation. So how industry or Microsoft had responded to that was this picture that you could see on the screen. In here, they came up with half-cooked avatars without the legs, or at least they attempted to create an environment where if you are in a business meeting or even in a lecture, then people can actually assess whether someone is engaged, participating or not, right? So this was their attempt to it. Of course, it is still at an infantry stage, but technology would improve. Then some wise men said that it is not the job of customers to know what they want. And that comes from late Steve Jobs. And he rightly said so, because how many customers could have imagined iPod? How many customers or users could have imagined MacBook, right? So customers, even if they have some knowledge, they wouldn't have domain-specific knowledge to come up with such tools. So now big tech is spearheading the vision of Metaverse. And two main companies in driving the vision of Metaverse are Meta, Facebook, and then Apple Vision. Apple, of course. Earlier this month, Apple launched their own Apple Vision Pro, which you could see on the screen. The price tag on it is around 5,000 Canadian dollars, right? And let's just say if Metaverse is dead, if we agree with that rhetoric, then Meta already had launched Meta Oculus Pro, which you could see here on the table as well. And the price tag on it at that time when it was introduced was $2,500. And some of the skeptics also say that very less people who are there in Meta Horizon worlds. Then someone would ask that why Apple had jumped into the same tunnel where Meta was. If no one is fond of Metaverse, then why Apple would do so? We will reflect more on it later on, but I would keep you wondering why. And 5,000 price tag on Apple Vision Pro is why? Because they want to attract and lure the developers so that the ecosystem is developed first, and then they will open it up for the regular users or consumers. Right? Okay. So this was basically the concept of Metaverse. What is Metaverse? More immersive, and it is the new internet. Right? So now I will talk about some of the use cases of the metaverse, some of the popular brand names or popular companies have opened up their storefronts in the metaverse, including Nike, Gucci, Walmart, Ralph Lauren, and some of the unpopular ones have also opened up their storefronts in metaverse. So let me give you some examples. The first class example is of Nike. So Nike has opened up its storefront in metaverse at the platform called Roblox. Nike has so far attracted 21 million users in the Nike land just after 1.5 years, 2 years back. And some of the stats show that almost 7 million people have purchased from Nike land, contributing to $200 million of revenues. So this is one of Nike's digital initiatives, and they have also invited LeBron James to be in the Nike land, where he coached and interacted with users in the metaverse. And from such digital initiatives, Nike has acquired almost 26% addition into their revenue, not just metaverse but overall, which is a remarkable stat. Why? Because not much time has been spent when the metaverse sort of came into being. Another example is of Gucci Garden or Gucci Town. They have also created and initiated some marketing campaigns with their Flora perfume campaign. They attracted millions of users. Users can also interact with their brand ambassador, Miley Cyrus, in the metaverse. One fun fact in here was that one of the users purchased a Gucci bag for actual $4,400 in the metaverse. Now, someone would ask, why would someone spend $4,400 on a Gucci bag in the metaverse, which has no real value in the real world, right? And it has no real value. It has been purchased in the form of Robux, which is Roblox currency. But if you come to think of it, there are hundreds or thousands of avatars in the metaverse. Same goes with, there are Facebook boasts of having 2.85 billion users, right? And only the ones that they have a blue verified tick, they are given more weightage in terms of what they write on the social media channels. So let's just say there are hundreds of avatars in metaverse, and if someone has a Gucci bag, or if someone is wearing a Nike gear, then they would stand out from the rest of the population. So the element of exclusivity, uniqueness, prestige is there, right? Another example is of Hyundai Mobility Adventures. Hyundai wants to showcase its future mobility solutions to the users who are already familiar with Hyundai's cars and technologies. They want users to interact with their upcoming models, Ioniq 7, and their concept cars, provide feedback. So this is what Hyundai is doing. Another example is of Samsung. So Samsung took a different standpoint. Samsung wants to showcase its sustainability initiatives into the metaverse world. Right? So they are not emphasizing much on the products, but they want to showcase their sustainability initiatives, how they are contributing to sustainability development goals, how they are lowering down the carbon footprint, and so forth. But all of these examples have something in common. Can anyone identify what is that thing which is common in all these examples? So all of these examples are based on gamification principles. So all of them are games, and some of the independent surveys that have been conducted by companies state that if it is not a game in the metaverse, people do not really care about what the brand is. So gamification principles include the sense of purpose. There are objectives, competition, cooperation, instant feedback is being obtained. So based on that, all of them, they use gamification principles, and people at the moment do not really care about anything else but besides games, right? The next, so these were more of the consumer use cases. Some of it has already been explained by Abdul, but one of the very fascinating concepts in the metaverse is of digital twin. Digital twin is the virtual replica of the physical, let's just say, assembly line or production plant. Sensors are installed and information is obtained in real time. How that information is utilized further, it is used to improve the optimization and efficiency, right? To remove the bottlenecks and make more informed decisions. So that is why digital twin is like a very fascinating. Car manufacturing companies are using it. A specific example would be of BMW. BMW is using NVIDIA's Omniverse, where they wanted to optimize their planning and operations. So what they did was, when they operated through Omniverse, they were able to get a boost in their production planning by 30%, which is again very, very good. Another example could be of Lowe's. Lowe's, the home retail company, and they are also using NVIDIA's Omniverse, where the retail associates can look at the inventory and product information in real time so that they can make their strategies accordingly. Right? So digital twin concept is more profound now, but if you just look at these pictures and look at the avatars, they are not in a very good state at the moment, right? Which I will explain a little bit later. Okay, so the gamification principles overall are not new. What happened with LinkedIn, it has been applied in previous contexts as well. So at LinkedIn, people were not really willing to provide their information. If they would just provide their information about education or work, and profiles were largely incomplete. So LinkedIn introduced a progress bar in there. So if you just have put your information about education in there, then 20% of the profile is complete. Just by introducing that progress bar, the completion, they saw a remarkable change where more people were completing their profiles. This is one aspect of the gamification principle applied in a bit of a traditional context. Right. So I will try to wind it up. Then, elephant in the room, is the metaverse dead or alive? So if I have to ask the audience that we have, so how many of you think that metaverse is dead with a raise of hands? And how many of you think that metaverse is alive with a raise of hands? Okay, I wouldn't want to have a quick poll over there, but it's fine. Right, so there are two schools of thoughts. One school of thought can be attributed to the skeptics who say metaverse is dead, which is rightly so. Why? Because at the moment technology is not that sophisticated. Who would want to buy a $5,000 head-mounted device? I wouldn't buy it. Metaverse is dead. If you look at the examples of Nike Land, Gucci, they are just bad cartoons. Metaverse is dead, right? And then who is driving or spearheading the change regarding the metaverse? Facebook has been under like strict scrutiny of data breaches. They have a history of data breaches. Metaverse is dead. All of these concerns are fine. There are so many unanswered questions regarding metaverse. But on the other hand, there are proponents or advocates of metaverse who see the value in metaverse. And technological innovation is always very brutal. They do not look at the industries. They do not look at the fact that how established industries. Look at the example of Uber. Look at the example of Airbnb. They just rehauled or restructured the whole scenario of ride-hailing and then hotel industry. And at the same time, if I talk about floppy disks, MP3 players, Walkman, video cassettes, VCRs, if there is anyone from Generation Z in here, they wouldn't even know what I'm talking about, right? But maybe the older ones know. So technological innovation is so brutal that it just changes the whole scenario, irrespective of the fact how established an industry is. And why is it so? It can be attributed to one aspect of liquid expectations, right? So what is liquid expectations? When liquid expectations can be understood through the example of Uber, which means that Uber has set such high standards for customer service. You know who the driver is, you know how much you're gonna pay, you know what is the route, and all those aspects are like credible. If you come across any problem, you know that you'll be refunded. So that level of expectations is expected from other industries as well, healthcare and governmental institutions. So when you have liquid expectations, when consumers want more from the industry, they want better experience, they want enriched experience, then it means that Metaverse is not going to go away. And lastly, I would argue that Metaverse is still alive and thriving, and with the passage of time, more and more users would be there. We saw some of the using samples. Metaverse will only be dead if augmented reality is dead. It will only be dead if virtual reality is dead. It will only be dead if blockchain technology is dead, right? As these technologies will improve and become more sophisticated, Metaverse would thrive. And one example is of artificial intelligence or ChatGPT. Of course, my colleague would expand more on it. But now if I have to create an image and I'm not good at drawing, I will just input, okay, draw an image for me like that, and Bing will create it for you. So with all those improvements, Metaverse would improve as well. And lastly, here is some prediction from the thought leader McKinsey. So by 2030, the Metaverse could generate 4 trillion to 5 trillion across consumer and enterprise use cases. And here, if you look at the consumer use cases, the relative 2030 use case potential is very high in the e-commerce industry, right? And other industries, the potential is relatively low. Similarly, in enterprise use cases, banking, discrete manufacturing, media processes, professional services, retail. So here, the use case potential is very high as opposed to others. Right, so finally, the bad cartoons would improve and Metaverse would improve with the passage of time. Thank you so much.
Okay, so I'm going to read one comment and then we have one question from online audience. Schenker says, I believe it's alive, but it has definitely not picked up pace at the magnitude at which Facebook and other tech majors would have been envisioned it to be. So the question from audience is, are Canadian companies investing in the Metaverse in step with other companies in other countries?
So this is from you or from you? Okay, so are Canadian companies investing in the Metaverse?
Yeah.
I think, in my opinion, it is still at very early stages. You know, nowadays the favorite child is ChatGPT, generative AI. Everyone is focusing on that because they were able to link with customers in a way where ChatGPT has created value for the customers. Here's a 300-page document, summarize it for me in 5 pages, and ChatGPT will do it for you. So I want to search for something and Google gives me 300 pages of that, and ChatGPT will give personalized answer or recommendation. Oh, here is how you are able to fix the problem. Companies at the moment, some of the known brands, I shared some statistics, but I think we are going to see what happened with the social media. Initially, social media was merely a connectivity and socialization channel, and commerce part came later on when when the ecosystem was there, when social media was able to, equip businesses so that they can do buying and selling over there. Same goes with Metaverse. At the moment, big companies do have the resources to invest in the Metaverse, but for smaller companies, it will take a little bit of time. And Apple has a good strategy where they are luring or attracting developers initially. And when the ecosystem is developed, then you're going to see how things would change.
Thank you very much. Then Megan, any question? Good. All right. Okay, thank you very much, Waqar. Okay. And so next, I'm going to introduce Dr. Michelle Chen. She's Assistant Professor of Business Communication at Department of Communication, Popular Culture, and Film. And her research interests focus on the impact of social media technologies on social movements, engagement, and political participation in support of social issues or causes. Michelle teaches courses related to social media campaign, business communication, and new media literacy. And so today she's going to share with us about new trends in social media marketing.
Thank you so much for the introduction. And thanks for having me here. And so when we think about social media, trends in social media marketing, there are a lot. But one of the key trends, I would say, is around 2020, especially with Black Lives Matter in North America. We've been seeing a lot of brands ramping up their efforts, right, and showing like issue and cause solidarity as consumers are increasingly expecting brands and their CEOs to now take a stand on current issues. And so because consumers' purchasing decisions are shaped not just by their products or service attribute, but also by brand reputation and kind of brand image, brands have kind of expanded right now, as we see the shift since 2020, expanded their marketing communication strategies to include being vocal about social issues, particularly on social media. And so brand activism is really good at actually helping build emotional capital, which is great at kind of creating and maintaining trust with their consumers. And so this particular practice can really increase, brand loyalty, purchasing intention. And one of the important points about, and that's why, benefits of participating in brand activism is fostering positive electronic word of mouth. And so this is important because it helps brand organically gain new customers. So it kind of lowers their, customer acquisition costs, and it really expands their brand organic reach on social media. And being able to do that, expanding the organic reach, is really key for a lot of brands because it lowers your cost in acquiring customers. So the key question today, right, in this really increasingly polarized climate and cancel culture, the question is, can brands afford to stay silent? Can brands afford to stand on the sidelines? And one of the things about brand activism, especially in causes and social issues that your customer care about, is it signals this common ground with current and prospective consumers' values and beliefs. And so in a recent survey report, 63% of respondents say that they will buy or advocate for a brand if it aligns with their brand values, with their own personal beliefs and values. And 67% of consumers want brand to take a stand on social media, believing that brands can actually be effective at raising awareness around important issues when brands speak up, right? And interestingly, consumers actually want brands to do more for social issues. And so this brand activism actually presents a really unique opportunity, and it aligns with the customer expectation to promote and inform several discourses around social, cultural, environmental, and human rights issues. A lot of consumers now believe that brands actually now have this social responsibility to engage in causes. And so what exactly is brand activism? So brand activism differs from corporate social responsibility or cost-related kind of marketing in that it is purposeful. So it's purpose, it's value-driven, but it takes this additional step of growing awareness and gathering kind of support around this issue. So Patagonia, Nike, Ben & Jerry's, for instance, are great examples of brands that have done a good job with their brand activism, right? So the important thing to bear in mind about brand activism, it is not just about what the stance is about, but it's also about how the stance is taken, how it is expressed. And so over here, I have a bunch of examples. And as you can see in some of the examples, like Nike did a really good job with Colin Kaepernick and increased their sales and increased their share prices with their partnership. But on the other hand, we have Anheuser-Busch Bud Light example, which is fairly recent, happened around June, where their partnership with social media influencer Dylan Mulvaney failed. And so the question really is, why do some brands do so well, like Nike, Patagonia, Ben & Jerry's, and other brands, you know, like Anheuser-Busch or Ralph Lauren? Why did those partnerships fail? So it really boils down to this question of authenticity. And in today's climate, consumers, because they're on social media, and a lot of, you know, again, we talked about social media as being this channel of interaction, they are sharing information, looking at brand practices, etc., doing their own homework, right? And so authenticity matters really today, more so than ever. So brand authenticity, or rather authentic brand activism, really involves two things, the messaging and then the corporate commitment. And so this is the corporate practices, do they have those actions, etc., to a specific cause that the brand proclaims to support, right? So when brand activism messages supports their brand purpose and their mission and are consistent with the corporate practices and action, this is seen as, to the consumer, as authentic brand activism. In fact, it's seen as really natural. But when the consumers perceive brand activism to be the message, the brand activist messaging does not match the brand's purpose or values and are not consistent with their corporate practices, then brands are likely to be accused of self-serving and being opportunistic. And we see this quite often, right, when brands jump on the bandwagon, right, around like 2020 Black Lives Matter movement. And so when consumers perceive the brand to be inauthentic, or when they're doing this, you know, inauthentically, this can really harm and damage brand reputation and lead to boycotts from consumers, specifically when we see with Bud Light, with a lot of people boycotting Bud Light. And so when you decide to engage, right, because customers on one hand expects your brand to engage in brand activism, it's a great opportunity to kind of increase your market share. And so lots of brands want to engage in brand activism. So there are a couple of key things to really think about, right? So one of the first things to make sure that you're really engaging in authentic brand activism is, does your brand value purpose and messaging strategy, right? And even product or service positioning, does it align with the cause that you're advocating? Is it compatible with the cause or the brand, the cause that you're supporting, right? This is known as brand fit or cause brand congruency, right? And so a high fit between a brand and the cause makes it naturally believable, increases the likelihood of consumers' perception of authenticity. It becomes really natural. You don't really need to do a lot of convincing, right? And so on the other hand, if there is not a good fit, what happens is it triggers the consumers to elaborate and think more about, oh, why, it doesn't really fit my prior expectation of the brand, doesn't really fit how I perceive the brand. And then when your consumers start investigating or questioning that or elaborating, having those thought process, then the chances of them thinking of this brand activism as inauthentic, self-serving, and opportunistic increases, right? And so it's really important to think about this brand fit. And so another key thing to really think about is, how does this issue and how does this cause impact your customer, your employees, and your target audience, aka your stakeholders? So for instance, if your company is resource intensive and it already engages in trying to reduce carbon footprint. So your brand might want to engage in sort of sustainability kind of activism. There's a natural fit there. Another example is, if like wages, right? A lot of companies do that, and their hiring practices, as well as trying to decrease the wage gap between different genders in your company. Then if that is already what your company is doing, then naturally you might want to participate in like the Women's International Day, as an example, or to be outspoken about like gender wage gap, right? Because it impacts your employees, it impacts some of your customers, etc. So these are just some of the things to think about. And then the other key thing to think about is your brand able to substantiate this activist messaging with specific corporate practices and language, right? And so how can your brand meaningfully influence this issue? And so this is something that a lot of brands don't really think about, because when you're thinking about how can your brand meaningfully impact this issue, it's really about, do you have the expertise? Do you have the resources? Are you willing to put the resources into changing corporate practices, or into, changing corporate practices to kind of align with that messaging, right? And so avoid making broad and general claims that can be hard to substantiate. And so saying things like, socially responsible, this is for social good, it's really hard to substantiate that. Like, what does being socially responsible mean to your brand? What does social good mean to your brand? So what you want to do is to really match like precise social benefits with really specific corporate practices. And so an example would be saying that, if you're like, our brand cares a lot about, gender wage gap. So you want to show in your corporate practices that, yes, we have been committed to hiring, or we've been committed to this and that, having really specific, tangible kind of practices to back it up, right? And so you want to explain your decision to take a stand on the issue instead of just taking a stand on it, especially if your brand is kind of pivoting or changing their brand image. And so explaining why in a very genuine way, it will be really important, mixing emotions with rationality. And so another thing to think about is, how does your target audience and customer feel about the issue? And will they align with your message? So before initiating an activism campaign, conduct a study with this aim of really uncovering perceived brand compatibility and aligning with your target audience values. I would say a great example, and I think this is so important today, especially with cancel culture, is not all brand activism, not all cause is the same or seen as, on the same level. Some are more controversial than others. So an example of Anheuser-Busch, right, the Bud Light example with that partnership. But they didn't really do, I would say, they perhaps didn't really do a market research to really understand, or rather they failed to anticipate kind of their core customer base and how their core customer base feel about the issue. And so there is not that alignment, right? And so today it's super important to really have surveys, market research, or even just being on social media and monitoring your brand sentiment, listening, doing some keyword research to see what your customers, current customer, prospective customers are saying or thinking about this issue, right? And so then you can think about, after that, you're like, okay, so it seems like, my customer base wants us to take the stand, or even if your customer base does not want you to take a stand on this issue, then the question is, what is the price of silence? And this is another big one, because in today's cancel culture, climate, lots of brands, weigh that, and they're like, well, perhaps we don't want to say anything. But there is a cost as well, right, with not saying anything, because certain issues like racism, sexism, or homophobia, for instance, right, this is a great opportunity for brands to kind of take a leadership on the position, right? For brands to kind of say, hey, we, especially the customer base values that, to say, hey, we are, we align, we know what you care about, and we align with your beliefs, right? And so if you don't speak out, sometimes that may be seen as, inaction can also be seen as a form of action. So your inaction could then be detrimental if your consumers feel, or your customers feel like you do not care about the issue, right? And so they can end up hurting your brand reputation as well. And so ultimately you want to weigh this potential negative backlash with potential brand, positive benefits such as brand loyalty, trust, positive word of mouth, and then increase purchase intention. And so you want to take your time to listen, monitor the development of the issue on social media, and not jump on the bandwagon. So an important thing is to create this competitive map to find out what competing brands are talking about on the issue, and then how your message compared to that. So you can think about in terms of when I am engaging in this, am I doing enough, or am I doing too little? And then again, kind of monitoring this is really monitoring development of the issue is important, because you can kind of get a sense of what the mood and the sentiment of your consumer base, right? To see whether they're interested in this issue or not. And so if your customer base, you realize that they're already in support of this issue, of course, go ahead. But if they're indifferent, this may present a good opportunity for you to jump, to go in and advocate for the cause. But if your customer base are like against it, but you're trying to pivot, it's okay to participate in the brand activism, but the important part is to have a social media crisis plan or contingency plan when there was a backlash, right? And so say, for instance, your brand decides to implement brand activism, it really is this balancing act between how many consumers will be delighted versus how many will be enraged, right? So here are kind of a number of tips for you to think about implementing authentic brand activism. The first one is really understanding your stakeholders' needs. When I mean stakeholders, I don't just mean consumers, right? A lot of brands think of it as just consumers. We're thinking really about your community partners, your employees, your prospective consumers, etc. So understanding your employees' needs and whether they would be, in support of this cause is also really important. You want to take leadership on an issue, and so this can be kind of interesting, especially if a cause is kind of, controversial. And showing that you are taking leadership can show to your consumers that you really do care about this issue, and could actually be a really good way to kind of capture market share. And great, especially if you're a smaller brand and you're just starting out, right? Walk your talk. I would say this is the most important thing in brand activism, because when you're out there and you participate in brand activism, for instance, your consumers and social media, social media users will scrutinize your activist messaging. They will also scrutinize your corporate practices. And so making sure that, you are transparent as well, transparent about your previous practices, previous messaging, current practices, and your future practices is really important, because, knowing that they will scrutinize, you want to make sure you have policies or action that you can use to justify why you are taking a stance, not just taking a stance because it is trendy. So you want to analyze the risk of engaging in specific activism. And this again, as we see more examples of certain brands doing well with certain activism, certain causes, but not well with other causes, the specific activism matters a lot. So again, going back to the Anheuser-Busch example, right? For them, not really assessing the risk or assessing how their loyal customer base will feel about this specific cause when they partner with a transgender influencer is one of the reasons why there was such a major backlash, which caused them to lose a lot of money, and I think dethroned them from being the top sales brand in the United States to, I think, second now. And then, of course, you want to monitor your association, your partners, and spokesperson when you decide to partner with an activist or a community organization, making sure that their record is squeaky clean is really important as well, because of the analogy guilty by association. So this is something that a lot of brands kind of overlook. They're super excited to jump in and partner with social media influencers without really assessing, is there really a fit with the social media influencers brand image and your brand? And last but not least is always prepare for unexpected twists and turns. And then again, this goes back to having a social media contingency plan that is really based on monitoring and listening, engaging your consumer as well as your social media audience's sentiment as the issue is developing. So that's all. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. I didn't see the question from online panel, but Megan or Roseanne or Paige, do you have any questions for Michelle?
I'm just wondering, just in what you've noticed, if there are any, even if the cause and the brand are a good fit, are there any cases that certain causes just tend to fall flat or fail more than others? Even if they do tend to be good fit, people just are disinterested or?
Yeah, that's a good question. It really depends, I would say, if there is a good fit. So I think it goes all the way back to understanding your customer base and how they really think. So even if there is a good fit, right? And sometimes change is hard. It takes a while. And so if a brand wants to pivot, and so for instance, Anheuser-Busch, Bud Light examples, they were trying to target a younger demographic. So they're trying to make the change. And again, that transition can be hard. But I mean, for them, maybe they're not a good example because there's not really a fit there for them. But so it really depends on certain topics are really politicized right now, and a hot button issue. So it's really that market research is important. Monitoring, what your audiences are saying, and then actually doing a poll to see how they feel about it. And there are certain times where brands would go ahead and still get involved in brand activism, even if their mission or their values doesn't really fit. It's not super congruent, but they still do it. And then just like you can do it, but making sure that you have a justification for why you're doing it in an authentic way is really important.
I just have a quick question, sorry. Yeah. Love this, by the way, because I do a lot of brand activism. My question is, for a smaller company that is trying to get into this space where they're focusing on, say, a very niche topic and they want to get into some form of brand activism, how can they engage their community to see it? Because social listening is not really working because they are newer, they don't want to seem like bandwagoners, but it is something that's important to, say, the company or to the founders or things like that. How can they go about seeing how they'll be perceived by their audience?
So I would say if your brand is really new, who are the competitors and seeing like who their competitors are. And then, so if you don't yet have like, a platform or to engage in social listening, look at your competitors, see who their consumers are, what they really care about. And then at the end of the day, I think the important thing is going back again to your brand's values and position, right? And so that I would say it's key because at the end of the day, when I think about authenticity, it really is stemming from there. Like, does this cause that you're aligning with, does that actually naturally fall with the brand story, with your brand story, with your brand goals? And you should work, that way. And so depending on the cause, so for instance, certain brands like, if brands who, again, resource intensive, right? So brands that are kind of resource intensive, they care about climate change, sustainability would then be a really, natural kind of fit as a cost, right? But then if your employees, if you hire a lot of LGBTQ plus employees, then you can say yes, maybe trans rights or LGBT plus rights is something that you want to engage in, and you have sort of like the backing, right? This is my corporate practice. These are my hiring practices. So it really depends. At the end of the day, you don't want to jump into pick a cause. I'll say pick a couple of causes that is really natural fit, and that's your lane. Stay within the lane.
Yeah. And then one more question, just more personal opinion.
Yeah.
On your end, and bringing it back to authenticity. Cancel culture, obviously, we know media, sometimes brands make a mistake, right? And in terms of that authenticity, based on like your thoughts, I know it can vary depending on the company and so many other factors, but would you recommend as a quick kind of marketing plan where when they went left and they shouldn't have went right, really owning up to that initially, being like, hey, we thought this, because we've been in these situations with one of my clients as well, and of like how we're going about it, and they're American too, there's a whole lot of issues we're fighting for. So I wanted to get your insight on the most authentic ways to be like, yeah, we really messed up here. Yeah, and this is where we were going, or putting together this whole marketing plan and risk kind of looking not the best.
So for sure, you definitely do want to have your social media contingency plan. It's like, if this, then what? You know, we can talk about this later. But being transparent is really important. I'll give you an example. When the Black Lives Matter movement happened, one of the smaller financial banks decided, you know, like they were looking at all the other bigger competitors. The other banks were like, well, Black Lives Matter, we really don't want to get involved in this. This smaller brand came out, and then again, you know, take leadership of the issue, basically said, you know, we recognize this historic, you know, our historic, not just the bank itself, but banking in general, you know, as being, explaining how, you know, explaining their role in sort of keeping certain groups down. And so they recognized that. They didn't even talk about their own brand. It was not about them at all. It was like banking, financial services. We're sorry that we didn't really, you know, like support. And then they say, look, these are our practice. We want to do better. You want to listen? So listen, they're like, we want to open it up. We want to listen. And they show examples. Here are some of the events that we're doing with community partners. Yeah. Right away. They did their homework. And then number two, they're like, here are some of the corporate practices that we're going to instill. But they didn't, the one thing they didn't do was jump on the bandwagon right away. It took about 1 or 2 weeks, you know, and then they went in with this plan. And so smaller banks, like they saw that as a good opportunity, like we want to be the leader on this issue when all the other big banks are not willing to, And I thought they did a really good job at doing that. And then they created the whole page with everything, listing everything, and then now they do track it. If you go to their website, you can see, like, this is what we promised. Here is how we are keeping up with money. This is their promise. Thank you.
Yeah. And then, so I think it's I think what research that we're also doing is that it also matters the way you convey that message. Is it a rationalized message or is it an emotional message?
Yes.
So the tone of the message also makes a huge difference. And I and Professor Wang, we're also doing another research, the timing as we're talking about. Were you the first one to announce it, or were you the last one to do it? If somebody else has already talked about the mistake that you have done and people are already talking about you, so if it's later timing or it's before, or you were the one who just took the responsibility and you're like open about it, but then how would you convey that? Would you want to rationalize it, the mistake, or you would want to be a more emotional tone to your message? So those tones would also make a difference. There's a lot more to it, but
I'll be interested to know what you guys found. Like, did you guys?
We're still working on that.
That
we have some studies done. So there's a timing before, after, temporal. And then also the emotional and the rational tone to the message.
I'll be interested to see which one, if you guys measure both, or like.
We have primed and we have experiments done. Definitely.
We'll talk later.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Great discussion. So next we have Byron Russell. Byron is the Associate Vice President Digital Marketing at Geotab. He's a senior digital marketing leader with a successful history of delivering remarkable digital experience that delight clients and deliver measurable business results. He has developed a rare combination of digital strategy, technical development, and leadership skills to bring creative solutions from concept to implementation. He has extensive hands-on experience in e-commerce, SEM, SEO, email, CRM, marketing, automation, mobile, social, and programmatic media buying in both B2C and B2B organizations. And just want to mention that Byron is also our graduate class of 2009. Okay, so this is going to talk about generative AI in marketing. So let's welcome Brian.
Thanks, Caillou, for the introduction and for having me. And yeah, really excited to talk about generative AI and marketing. Believe it or not, though, digital marketing was not actually my first career choice. I started actually in the very competitive world of beauty pageants. So there is 3-year-old Brian and my sister. We just won King and Queen of this Sunburst beauty pageant competition. But then, I was 3 years old and I found myself weighing myself 6-7 times a day, reading the calories on the back of my animal crackers, and I thought this is a little bit toxic and I should probably pick a different path. So I quickly, retired from that. And yeah, Caillou, as you mentioned, really proud rock grad class of 2009. And yeah, since then I've held a number of roles, all in digital marketing with some pretty big brands here in Canada, Canadian Tire, Sun Life Financial, spent some time actually with McMaster University, and most recently in my role as AVP of digital marketing at Geotab, which is a business-to-business tech software company. So yeah, going to talk a little bit about generative AI, kind of some high-level thoughts on it, and then I have a number of tangible examples of how we're actually applying it with my team at Geotab. And then again, just a couple other thoughts, not so much on AI, but just emerging trends that I think digital marketers will want to be aware of. So I think first and foremost, absolutely not a passing fad. Okay, I think we'd all agree on that. Something that I would highly recommend everyone spend time immersing themselves in and learning how they can use the various generative AI tools out there, not just for marketing, but it's going to be embedded in all aspects of business. Marketing, sales, customer service, operations, finance, you name it. As a company at Geotab, we have all gone all in on it. Our CEO has given every divisional head KPIs to embed it into our workflows. So it's definitely not going away. I'm pretty bullish on this, but I think like 5 to 10 years, we will see a unicorn company, $1 billion valuation with 10 employees or less, just based on the efficiency of generative AI. Yeah. Might not be the right time frame, but I do think we will eventually see that. But the other really empowering thing for me and for my team so far is it's actually allowing marketers more time to spend generating really creative ideas, building strategies, and letting AI do a lot of that repetitive, lower value, sort of mundane work out there that we don't love doing so much. So I don't know if this is going to play or not, but we'll see. No, it won't. But we at Geotab just embedded ChatGPT interface in our actual software product. So it's a fleet management company. So you can imagine like a UPS out there, right? 100,000 trucks on the road delivering stuff. Our software is used to monitor where are the trucks? Are they on time? Are any of the engines at risk of breaking down? Fuel management, right? And the fleet managers can do all that. And previously, if you wanted to know if, how many of your vehicles were potentially going to need an oil change, you have to export the data, do some of that analysis yourself. Now, as of this week, you can go in, literally ask ChatGPT the question, well, our version of it, and it'll give you that answer right there. So, with the early beta testers of our customers, it's taking things that used to take 2 to 3 hours of analysis is now it responds in about 10 to 15 seconds. Right. And it's really funny, the topic of like really high expectations. As we built that out, we just went from 3 hours to 15 seconds, but already we're like, it's taking too long to give us that answer. 15 seconds is too long. Why can't it do it in 2 seconds, right? So it's really interesting how those sort of expectations change. So there's a number of ways that my team is actually using it. Community management is one area. So at Geotab, we have a community of existing customers where our community managers interact with them and they can ask questions of each other, etc. So there's just a good example here of questions being asked. So, can an unidentified driver be added to an exempt driver? And then these are answers from ChatGPT. So we work with our internal data science team to train ChatGPT on all of our internal product documentation and best practices. And now ChatGPT can provide answers. Really important though, we still have humans reviewing a lot of this because a big problem still in AI, generative AI, is hallucinations. So it can and will give you false information. There was a case recently where a lawyer used ChatGPT to prepare a brief for a judge, and ChatGPT came up with fake previous cases. And then it said, "Are you sure?" and asked for the sources of those cases, and also gave fake sources for those cases. So it was funny, the judge had to admit he had never seen something like that before. And so it's really, I think, critical that you still have that sort of human interaction. But we've got thousands of customers that ask questions all the time, and it's incredibly difficult for the community managers on my team to respond quickly enough. So we've got, the AI doing that initial response and then asking the user, "Did you find this helpful? Yes or no," right? So it's constantly learning whether or not the information it provided was useful. So a really good example there from a community management standpoint. Sentiment analysis, so big in, generally social media, but also in the community. And so again, we're able to take certain responses, feed it into ChatGPT, and then it's giving us a pretty good analysis on the evaluation of their sentiment. And then what it allows my community managers to do is identify those who have lower scores in sentiment analysis, to work with their account manager and understand, are they at risk of churning and losing a customer, right? So we're a software subscription business, so churn is a big, important piece for us. And I think as most marketers know, it's a lot easier to hang on to your existing customer than it is to bring in someone new, especially business to business, that side of it. So my team can now spend less time doing the analysis and surfacing it as insights to account managers and focus on retention, which has a massive business impact for us. This one I think is a pretty obvious use case out there. We're using it for email copywriting, but really you can use it for any kind of copywriting. Again, we spent time upfront training it on our brand tone of voice, how we want to sound, and you can see here through the 3 screenshots, right? We've got the first email, it wrote the email, then my manager prompted it again to say, "That is great, can you add more details about what will be discussed during the event in bullet points?" It came back with another iteration, and then the third one there, can you write it as if the audience were truck drivers in North America, right? And so there's still this need for that human refining or interaction, but things that used to take maybe an hour to write an email, 10, 15 minutes, right? So a lot more productivity for marketers, for sure. Content outlines for search engine optimization. Again, this is my search engine optimization manager telling ChatGPT they want to write a blog post about smog checks in the style of a guide that includes the following keywords. Here's the keywords. ChatGPT comes back with, here's the blog post title, and here's the outline. So then that outline gets handed to an actual human copywriter in this particular case to write. But generating that outline for my SEO research manager would have taken probably an hour, takes 5 or 10 minutes now. Now, in future iterations, we may actually try having ChatGPT write some of the actual SEO content. The challenge with ChatGPT in particular so far is it's not connected to the internet, so it is cut off as of September 2021, I believe. So as you know, the Google algorithms are changing daily sometimes, and so some of what it produces may be based on like best practices from 2 years ago. So we haven't really leaned into that yet, but I suspect eventually they'll open it up. I know Bard from Google obviously is connected to the internet, but yeah, a really good opportunity here from an SEO perspective as well. Same thing in SEO, generating and refining meta descriptions. So, prompting it to say, give me the meta title. It can be no more than 60 characters, no longer than 150 characters around this topic, right? And then it's cutting it back. And then again, you can see my manager there is refining the meta descriptions with additional keywords. So you still need to provide that overall strategy and guidance, but a lot of these sort of mundane use cases, again, that would have taken a lot of time, are now really, really simplified. So we're finding a lot of efficiency among the team. And it was really interesting, I've really seen an increase in the level of engagement and satisfaction among my team in the last few months. There's all this worry about will take jobs or replace jobs. And what I'm actually finding is that my team can spend so much more time doing the things they love, that they are engaged in, that they actually get excited about, and less time doing the stuff that they used to just have to do because it's part of the job. So for me, you know, the productivity outputs and then the engagement outputs have been really, really great. So ChatGPT is probably the, you know, generative AI tool that we're using the most. The other one that I am in love with lately is called Focus Clip. You can take a long form YouTube video, throw it in there, and in 10 minutes have a dozen perfectly optimized social media videos to share on TikTok, YouTube Shorts, Instagram. And it will give you a virality score of how likely it is to go viral or to get shared. And if you do need to make any edits to it, there's literally no technical requirements to edit the video. It's as simple as replacing copy in a Word document. So really, really powerful tool. Jasper.ai is another great copywriting tool that we're starting to play with. Headline for creating landing pages. So again, similar to the conversation earlier around AR and VR, you know, there's really this lowering of technical barriers to build these things, right? Like when I first started, when I graduated in 2009, I was hand coding emails, I was hand coding certain websites, right? And now I don't really necessarily need that skill as much anymore. I can really just focus on strategy, content development, understanding my customer, understanding the market. And then Full Story is a really neat one that I just started playing with this week that really builds like unique digital experiences that build on top of each other. So it remembers like the last thing you did on the website and then builds it from there as you come back and return. So really, really interesting sort of set of tools coming out from an AI perspective. I did want to touch on, because I get this question, like, what can I do to make sure that AI doesn't take my job, right? And I think we talked about it earlier is, for me, the biggest skill that I think any marketer should continue to have is that ability to understand intimately your customers. That is a marketing fundamental that has been around forever and I don't think is ever going away. And so I think you have the question of how can I understand how my audience or customers might respond to a cause? Sit down and talk to them. It's something that I don't think marketers do enough of. I definitely did not do enough of it early in my career because I relied on things like social listening or analytics tools to get some of that quantitative data, and there's still value there. But I don't think AI, at least in its current state and not in the immediacy, is really going to replace that sort of qualitative analysis. And then as mentioned, the marketing strategy piece, right? So I've not yet seen an AI that can really build an entire properly grounded marketing strategy. I think it will allow maybe less people to have inputs into a marketing strategy and get leaner. But that idea of sort of building the strategy is still there. And again, it comes back to that fundamental of know your customer, know the market, know your product. So I definitely make sure that those skills, you know, continue to refine. So that's sort of the generative AI piece. And I just wanted to talk a little bit about some really other interesting emerging challenges that I'm seeing out there and that we're tackling. So there's this concept called the attribution mirage, first coined by Chris Waqar. And really there's this really distinct difference between what our analytics tools like a Google Analytics or a Salesforce Marketing Cloud say are the channels that contributed to a customer becoming your customer versus what maybe actually contributed to it, right? So as marketers, when we build our marketing mix, you're going to get asked, well, what was the impact on the business? How much revenue did this marketing channel drive or this tactic drive, right? And if you look at it in Google Analytics or any other attribution tool, you will likely see that organic search, paid search, and direct traffic are the top three drivers of that. And that is likely because you're using that last click attribution model. So what did the person do right before they became a customer if they bought online? And generally speaking, the last thing someone does once they've made a purchase decision is go to Google, type in the brand name, find the URL, and then complete their search, right? And so you get the idea of, well, what about first touch attribution? Because that's a different model. So not what did they do on the website right before they converted, but what did they do on their first visit to the website? And again, you can see the difference here, whether it's last click in the middle column or first click on the right, it's still organic search, paid search, and direct are the top three. And it's a pretty, you know, minimal difference between the two. And the reason for that is because in today's world with 7, 10 touch points needed spread across multiple marketing channels, much of the actual discovery and evaluation process happens before they get to your website. It happens in places where it is much more difficult to measure. It happens in comment section on LinkedIn. It happens in private Slack groups. It happens through word of mouth, right? So it really becomes difficult to understand how you can drive more of that demand. And so what we're doing at Geotab is we've added a self-reported attribution to all of our lead forms. So when a business comes to us and says, I want a demo of your software, we're asking them, how did you hear about this? And this is really interesting. So if you look at the blue here, it is what our Salesforce Marketing Cloud quantitative analytics tool tells us brought people to request a demo from us. And by and large, they're telling us it's organic traffic, referral traffic, or Google Ads traffic. So if I'm an executive looking at this, and I only use that as my data point, I'm only gonna invest in SEO research and SEO optimization and Google Ads. But we took that same subset of leads and compared it against what do customers self-identify as bringing them to our website, and you start to see things like events, offline events, right? There's no way for a digital attribution tool to capture that. Organic social media, people just telling us that they saw a post from one of our employees. We also uncovered that a lot of our past customers were being exposed to our ads, and a lot of our current customers were being exposed to our ads. So the first thing we did was start excluding our current customers from our ads because we don't need to be spending money on them because they're already a customer. But yeah, this is something that I think is, as much as digital marketers, we lean on our tools, there's still that sort of qualitative curiosity that you need to really understand what's driving demand, especially when you look at your paid search. If it's all branded paid search, someone is typing in Geotab. So you can't make more people type in Geotab in Google until you figure out what's making them do that in the first place, right? So you've got the idea of organic and paid search to capture demand, and then some of your other channels like events, organic social, paid social media that drives that demand initially. So really just interesting analysis that's really changing how we are planning our marketing budget for 2024, right? Definitely looking at investing more in events and organic social media, and probably pulling back a bit on Google Ads for us anyways. And then the last thing I wanted to touch on, again, really big in the B2B world, is looking at sort of the difference in how people enter your marketing funnel. So on the left, these are people who have become a lead. So we've gotten their contact info because they've either filled out a form to request a demo or to speak to sales. On the right, you've seen it out there. There's an ebook, there's a white paper, there's an event. You have to put in your contact details to get or download that. And you can see the difference for high intent sources. People are actively requesting a demo. We are converting those leads to customers at 9% in this subset of data and generated $8.3 million in revenue versus only converting 2% of people who download ebooks, download white papers, and only contributing just under $2 million in revenue. So it's really important that you understand sort of what are the channels that are more likely to drive those high intent people, because they're going to convert at a higher rate. And you can see that despite having less than 50% of the amount of leads as the low intent sources, it has 4 times the amount of revenue contributed to it. So oftentimes executives, leaders will tell you, I need more leads, I need to speak to more customers, and it's not necessarily the case. What you need to do is speak to more of the right customers, right, and qualify. So yeah, just an interesting piece that we're sort of been exploring at Geotab as well. So yeah, that's it for me.
Question? Just have a question. Excellent presentation and what you are doing at Geotab. So what is your approach in combating the misinformation? Because like you mentioned that ChatGPT or the version of ChatGPT that you're using produces misinformation, it fabricates the information. And are there any layers to which they have access to that ChatGPT? Because there would come a time when everyone would start believing in what ChatGPT is saying. So then what is your strategy in combating the misinformation or fabricated information so that it does not spread further because it can have serious consequences?
Absolutely. Yeah, great question. So for us, there's a few things. Certainly at the company level, but within the marketing level, nothing goes out to the public that has been generated by ChatGPT that has not had a human intervention to verify the accuracy of the information that we're putting out there. So again, really we're using it as a productivity efficiency tool that allows us to produce things more quickly, more efficiently, but there's always that human layer that's looking at it. So those blogs that get written right or anything like that, an SEO manager or someone else on the brand marketing team is making sure before we put it up on our website for the world to see that it's been verified and processed. And then the other thing that we do is even queries or things that we're asking ChatGPT, the guiding principle is assume that it might get hacked and that it might become public knowledge one day, and that whatever you put in there, you're comfortable with that the world can see that. So we put no PII, no customer data in there. Even the version that is embedded in our product, the actual data never leaves our secure environment. It's just the query that goes to the Microsoft Azure cloud. So if ChatGPT or Azure gets hacked, we have zero PII or customer data exposure there. So we've been very, very careful with that. And we have really, really strong partners in legal and in compliance who are every week, it seems like, updating our company policy and approach to how we use ChatGPT and other AI.
I just want to mention that in the course that actually I demonstrate how to use ChatGPT to generate the digital marketing plan. So I have my participants to do their own digital marketing plan and compare with the one they generated from ChatGPT. So Roseanne, or have you had a chance to try?
No, I haven't yet.
No, I haven't.
I'm in the midst of creating my own right now.
Yeah.
But I haven't gotten around to that yet. It's all still very, very new for me, but I love the thought of my department. There are 3 of us. We have a chat function on this new website that we brought forward. It was recommended that from the 8:30 to 4:30, one of us is always manning that chat. In most cases, the person is forwarded on to another staff. It runs itself as almost like a switchboard. To be able to train something like this to forward an inquiry to the right area would save one of us kind of being changed. I mean, knowing that we would still have to check in on it in the beginning, and I'm sure all throughout, but just knowing that we don't have to be chained to our desks at all times to have the same impact and hopefully still have the same type of interaction with people who are coming looking for help.
Just sorry, out of curiosity, for what your company used for this, like the internal ChatGPT, how long did that take to implement and train the system?
So the team started on it in April.
Oh, wow.
So a really important piece with being able to use generative AI is you need to have really quality data and databases, data sets underpinning it, right? It's sort of garbage in, garbage out, right? And so because our company at its core is a data company and we process something like, I don't know, 3.5 million data points every minute or something like that, we have that skill set in our DNA, which is why it was very quick for our team to do it, right? We have a massive data and analytics team of probably 100 plus data scientists. So we were in a very fortunate position that way. Obviously not something that, a really small company or even a large company that isn't sort of have data in its DNA could do as quickly. Though I did also come across another AI app that I'm on the waitlist for that will create other AI apps. So I'm interested to see how that works. But yeah, so it's took about 2 months. We're still in beta with it. So it's just launched this week, just opened up the waitlist for it. But yeah, probably about 2 months to get it from like concept to first stage in the market.
So, how do you see the concept of digital twin? If you have like a fleet of 1,000 trucks and engines and drivers and blah, blah, blah. So if you have a digital twin, for example, you guys can implement, that's what the companies are sort of working towards now. That's where you can simulate, run, see how long this would, like the engine would last, probably, I don't know, how many drivers, sort of optimize the requirement for the trucks and stuff, because then that's a place where you guys can also play. Do you see that?
Yeah, so I had not been overly familiar with the concept of digital twin, but as you were both talking about it, I made a note to talk to you after and see how we can use it. That's immediately what I went to was, because we're in the same boat a lot of times, right? We have to, so a big piece for us from a corporate perspective is sustainability, and because you imagine how much trucks and things like that contribute to the sustainability challenges we have, right? And so we do a lot of analysis for our customers around what of your current internal combustion engine vehicles could be replaced by an EV, right? And right now, all of that analysis is done on actual vehicles.
Yeah.
And so it'd be interesting to look at, could it potentially be done with digital twins of those vehicles? Yeah.
So quickly, I have a comment from, and not to be pessimistic, but is the current use of ChatGPT not eroding productivity when human fact check is necessary?
Yeah, great question. So I haven't found that, because you're trading sort of, a couple hours that it might take to write a long form piece of content for 15 to 20 minutes that it would take to read and review it. So we haven't found that to be the case, at least in our use.
Good, thank you. I think this question, Von Schenker, is for Michelle. Is it really required for business brands to advocate for a particular cause? Where does the pressure come from? And will this cause a polarization of sorts in the long run?
Sorry, can you please repeat
So-
the question?
So I think that the first question is it really required for business to advocate for a particular cause?
Is it ever, well, I would say, again, it depends, but it's definitely not necessary for the brand to get involved in brand activism. And it actually depends on sort of what industry you're in. So a lot of B2B industries, maybe it's certain causes, it may not actually be it may not actually be a good brand cause fit, and then it doesn't actually make sense to be involved in those causes. Especially you see that more B2B, but B2C, especially retail companies, right? And then you can kind of think about really, again, bet to the audience, right? And understanding your audience. There are certain situations where, again, like the price of silence. Think about, weigh that risk. What are the risks involved in participating in this cause versus the price of silence, right? And so, again, certain causes, yes, sometimes brands want to do that to show solidarity, especially if your employees, so we think about stakeholders here, especially if your employees and especially if your customer base or prospective customers, and maybe you're trying to target a new group of demographics, right? If they care about those causes because it impacts them. So if a brand goes, there's a certain demographics, be it gender, be it race, be it class, for instance, then you may want to see what are some of those causes that actually impact your consumers, right? Then you may decide, okay, I want to participate in this cause. But it's absolutely okay, and some brands do that, to just stay silent. Then the question is, again, what is the price of silence? So for instance, like Disney, I think that was in Florida when there was a law that was passed in Florida, and Disney decided to stay quiet. And what happened was the employees, not necessarily the customers, but the employees felt really upset that Disney decided to stay quiet around that particular law. And I can't remember the specific law right now. So that is another issue, for Disney. It became an issue for their employees because I think they did a protest. And yeah.
Great, thank you so much. Thank you everyone, Brian, Michelle, Waqar and Abdul. Thank you very much for your presentation. So I believe we have the last slide to show. So thank you everyone for joining us for this webinar. Thank you for watching. And I'm Dr. Kayo Wang. I'm Professor of Marketing and Chair for the Department of Marketing International Business Strategy at Goodman School of Business. And I would like to thank you all for participating in this webinar. And I would also like to thank my colleagues at Goodman's group, Janice, Aidan, and Abdul for organizing this event. And if you can spend a couple of minutes scan the QR code and share with us your feedback, that would be great. And have a good evening. Thank you.